Hello, and welcome to another day of English 2. I'm your online facilitator, Miss Bear. Yesterday, we were introduced to some vocabulary and some essential questions for our personal narrative unit. Today, we're going to dig into our first text. Before we get too involved in our first text, though, I want to remind you about our anchor charts for our signposts, for our notice and note signposts. Remember that as we're reading today, I'm not going to remind you to mark these in your text, but I want you to. I want you to mark those contrasts and contradictions. I want you to mark those aha moments. I want you to mark those tough questions, the words from the wiser, again and again, and those memory moments. Remember that when we are reading and we come across those ideas, that the author or the narrator is giving us some clues as to the theme of the story, the conflict, the tone, the mood, and the plot. So again, I'm not going to remind you of those things because you should be very confident in your skills and noticing those signposts by now. So remember to mark those. That way when these questions come up, you are better equipped to answer those. Okay, so without further ado, remember that we are doing, this is our Unit 2, but this is Unit 1 for CommonLit. And I do want to give a little shout out. CommonLit is approved by our Mississippi Department of Education as a high quality instructional material. So these are really good units and really good lessons that are approved by our State Department. So I told you I was going to remind you about our essential question. What experiences lead us from childhood into adulthood? And so again, at the midterm of this unit, we're going to be writing a personal narrative answering the question, when does, I'm sorry, you're not answering a question, it's a statement. Write a personal narrative describing an experience that has been part of your transition out of childhood. When deciding on a moment to write about, consider the following: a loss you experienced, a realization or difficult truth that you learned, a new responsibility that you had to take on, and or a risk you decided to take. Today, we're going to be reading the text, Safety of Numbers, and it's about a daughter's complicated relationship with her mother. And guys, I know I've raised 3 children of my own. There are always complications in relationships with our parents. And so I hope that you can relate to some of this young lady's experiences. So your teacher should give you a text that looks like this, and it will show you that we're doing some whole reading. It will also tell you when we're going to do some partner reading. So again, you have plenty of room on your handout on this resource. Again, the resources are in CommonLit for your teacher that's in the classroom. But you will need this packet to follow along and mark these texts with the notice and note signposts, as well as answering some of the questions as we go along. So let's look at one of our first essential statements or questions. So is it better to listen to your friends or the adults in your life? So raise your hand and share those answers with your teacher. Good. In Safety in Numbers, the narrator's mother grew up in China before she moved to the United States. And so you can see on this map the United States and China and how far apart they are on this world map. So the setting of this story happens in China during a time of protest against the communist government. One of the most important protests happened in 1989 in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, and that's in the capital city. So thousands of protesters gathered in Tiananmen Square to demand democracy and freedom. Military forces fired on the protesters. Many of them were students, and it killed hundreds of thousands of people. In the story, the narrator will discuss some of these important historical moments with her parents. So as we read today, we will analyze how complex characters and specific plot points develop the theme. We're going to determine how the setting develops suspense and contributes to our understanding of a character. And we're going to analyze the way symbols and specific details develop our understanding of a character. So Let's get started with safety of numbers, and make sure that you have your handout that looks like the one on the screen. I am going to give you just a little bit of information beyond what they gave us originally in CommonLit. In the short story, the narrator's rebellious streak clashes with her overbearing mother. Although the narrator is compliant and goes along with some things, in the end, she makes a bold decision about how she wants to live her life. So as we read, focus on how complex characters develop the theme of the story. And remember those signposts, remember to mark those as you read. So we're going to start with a whole class reading, and I'm going to read, and then we will share out after paragraph 3, and then again after paragraph 8. When my friend Bobby Klein didn't make it into the gifted program back in 5th grade, Mom said, "What's so hard about IQ? There's nothing you can't study for." She's right, in my case. There is nothing she can't make me study for. She keeps a schedule that she brings out whenever I'm not where I'm supposed to be. On Saturdays, for example, when she catches me leaving through the kitchen door, she points to the red letters that read SAT. I say, "Yeah, Ma, I know, it's a Saturday." And Dad chuckles, which is his way of commiserating. My mother is from northern China, a woman with a small face and a big voice, and hair that springs from her head so fiercely you're sure it's about to have a word with you. She walks home for lunch every day because she believes in moderate exercise and the health hazards of plastic food containers. She is petrified of credit theft, house theft, car theft, and AIDS, uncomfortable around emotional confrontation, and underachievement. By the time the other kids in my year start prepping for the SAT, I have already taken 9 months of classes, 12 if you count algebra drills. Most of my mom's child-rearing energy is spent on my education, and she's impatient for the results. She likes the kind of success you can plot and graph, reports you can hold in your hand. This makes the SAT the score of all academic scores, representing both a return on one investment and the principle for the next. So I'm going to stop here because CommonLit asks the question to find evidence. So we're going to take a moment, and I want you to underline 3 details that reveal how the narrator views her mother. So I'm going to take a moment, and you do that real quick. All right, good job. Let's keep reading. And again, we're going to stop at paragraph 8. Like the Americans say, she muses, safety of numbers. That's what colleges want to see. You mean safety in numbers, I tell her, and that's something completely different. She lets out a little laugh. You think you know everything. The main word there is safety. What do you know about safety? What do you mean? Exactly, she says, as if that answers anything. All right, now I want you to think and share, and this is from our CommonLit question. The narrator's mother says safety of numbers instead of safety in numbers. What does the mother's misuse of this phrase reveal about what is important to her? So take a minute, think about that, and then share it with your partner next to you. Good job. All right, now we're going to do a little partner reading. So you're going to read paragraphs 9 through 19 with a partner. When you finish reading, answer the question, how has the mother's experience with entrance exams influenced her actions towards her daughter? All right, I'm sure that you had plenty of time to read that and answer that question. Thank you to your teacher for allowing us the time to pause during that moment. All right, we have one more section of whole class reading, and then we'll have another partner reading before we end for the day. So if you will turn to page 3 of your packet, and we're going to start at paragraph 20. There were other scores that mattered. 17 million of Mayo's youth were sent to the countryside for re-education. 10,000 arrested in connection with the June 4th movement. Hundreds to thousands killed at Tiananmen Square. Isn't that the scariest thing, he says? The fact that those death toll numbers are missing? Yeah, I say, But the truth is that I don't really know. I can't imagine the difference between 10,000 and 17 million. I can't imagine something so abstract as death or so concrete as Mom's involvement in all of this. All right, the text asks us again to pause, turn, and talk. So how does the narrator feel about her mother's old life in China? Turn to your partner and discuss that really quick. All right, I'm going to continue reading. Wait here, he says. He puts down the sander and goes over to the metal shelves that line the back of the garage. Motivational posters land on the floor and on top of him. The lids of cardboard document boxes. When he comes back, he's holding a faded photo of people standing together in a half circle in front of a school. Mom is there in the center. Her head turned and her eyes just barely catching the camera, as though distracted in mid-speech. She was an activist, he says. This was taken in May of 1989. If you think about it, you're in this picture too. I imagine myself over on the other side of the world, a tiny embryo stuck to the inside of her, like a snail. You're more like her than you think, he says. Yeah, right. How? You're fearless. He hands me a can of Mountain Dew from the stash he keeps hidden in the garage. Mom says Mountain Dew is the color of cancer. And even though I know that cancer doesn't have a color, the thought has me put off Mountain Dew. I think I drink soda anyway, and it's not as bad as I remember. I'm sure Mom has her reasons for running our lives the way she does, even if they only hold up in her own mind. Call them superstitions then, or the practices of a self-made faith. Somewhere there is a God that demands double locking doors and triple checking my homework. What I want to know is how the politics and the soda connect. In other words, at what point did she become so small in the living of life? I don't say any of this, but it's as if Dad hears anyway. They're her stories, he says softly. I can't tell them. All right, the author asks, or the text asks us a question, and it's a quick write question. So if you'll take out your pen and paper, or if you want to write it in the margin of your packet, what does the narrator mean that her mother becomes small in living her life? And there's one more quick write. How does this compare to the way her mother lived her life in China? So if you will write the answers to those questions in your packet, and then we're going to move to our last partner reading of the day. All right, you should have had time to read through, write through those answers. And now I want you to read paragraphs 30 through 33 with a partner. When you finish reading, answer the question, what motivates the narrator to test her mother's vocabulary? So once you have finished with your partner reading, I want you to, if you have any additional time today in your class, I want you to work on that vocabulary packet some more. So this is the end of today. Once you finish your partner reading, we will pick the story back up after paragraph 33 tomorrow. So until then, happy reading.